Hi, this is Tim of the Watchbox at Dubai Watch Week 2021, and we are with Chronoswiss, and what we're looking at right here is Mr. Gray. So, face value, what you're looking at is a lovely gray PVD on a stainless steel case, 44 millimeters in diameter. I measured this one 53.5 from lug to lug. So this is a full-sized watch. Now, what I love about it is that internally, it's artisanal. They do their own retrograde modules, and they do real reductive rose lathe guilloche. So this is not stamped guilloche. This is the real thing, done with a lathe by a guilloche. And the effect is absolutely radiant. You can see there's a sunburst with a radial wave pattern. It has a lovely billowing rosette-like quality. And as you can see, on top of that, we have three-dimensional dial architecture enlivened by their in-house retrograde complication, which is a 30-second retrograde. And oftentimes you see retrogrades where they can do little for the personality of a watch, dates or hours or periods that are so long in duration that you're obviously going to miss the jump. Here, this limited edition of 50 pieces has a wonderfully elevated 30-second retrograde, so something is always happening and there's always life on the dial. Now you can see, in the spirit of Chronoswiss regulator watches past, we do have a separation of the hours, the minutes, and the seconds, and for good measure, this is a loomed watch, surprisingly sporty in spite of its antiquarian lines. You can see elements of the original Chronoswiss cases were retained from the GR long styles of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, but they've been pared back a bit. The lugs are shorter. You can see the bezel features half coining, so it's no longer a full knurling that wraps from the flank all the way to the crystal. You can see there's a conventional domed bezel on top, and the much-loved onion crown is retained. Now, I mentioned this watch is sporty. Despite the fact that it does look a little bit like watches of the past, it is 100 meters water resistant, which jumped right out at me as a nice gesture to the collector, because today's collector wants to wear his watch all the time. He doesn't want to treat it like a delicate thing, even when it has high horology complications and guilloche. Internally, we have a breath of fresh air. They're still using ETA movements at Chronoswiss. This one delivered in the top grade, and you can tell because when you hack the balance, you can see the splayed spoke design of the top grade balance. The decoration is attractive, and you can see it has the monotone sort of grayscale aesthetic that characterizes this model. As you'll also note from the chaptering outboard, they do have an atelier in Lucerne. The watches are made in Lucerne in Switzerland, and there's a handsome array of decoration across the movement, thoughtfully done, a combination of stripes, engine turning, and blued screws. So altogether quite handsome. Automatic winding bidirectional. It does feature a stop seconds complication and approximately a 40 to 42 hour power reserve. So that right there is Mr. Gray. Now we're going to jump to Purple Haze. Excuse me while I kiss the sky. This watch right here takes some of the same design elements, but in a smaller case. So here we have 41 millimeters, and it's about 50.5 millimeters from lug to lug, which is always a critical dimension for me when I see these officer-style cases, because they do tend to have large wingspans across the wrist. So they made the lugs a little shorter compared to the original Chronoswiss watches, and that works well for the sake of ergonomics. Now we have a lovely spiral spoke constant seconds indicator here, still the regulator dial, a different type of guilloche. You can see it's the same rosette pattern, but in a lustrous and lovely purple to match the case. Now the first thing I asked when I saw this case is, what happens if it gets scratched? Can it be restored during a factory service? And the answer, happily, is yes, it can. So you can wear this watch without fear as a normal timepiece, and relish the fact that, again, a limited series of 50, it's always going to be a rare commodity. Now they use an interesting strap right here, which has a combination of a suede material on the bottom. You can see it's a sheer cut side showing the layers, and then there's a textile grain on the top with a monotone stitch, and both of these watches feature single fold deploying clasps, so I don't want to gloss over that fact. They are well equipped in that regard, handsome, and you can see that the color on both Mr. Gray and Purple Haze matches the case. Again, Purple Haze just being a little bit easier to wear, mechanically very similar with the absence of the retrograde and the presence of the tri-spoke. Both of these watches are 100 meters water resistant and loomed and in steel, so though they are slightly vintage in their aesthetic sensibility, they're very modern in their construction. This is Chronoswiss at Dubai Watch Week 2021.